Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. We are deep in the heart of spooky season, and what a good time. It's getting all cold and cool and crisp out there. Unless you're in Las Vegas where we've been going through a heat wave, but just snuggle down, maybe a cup of tea, read a good book. Today, we're looking at Dark Shadows by Marilyn Ross, actually W.E.D. Ross. A man who wrote under this name. He wrote under a lot of different names. Prolific writer. Did a lot of Gothic romance. And Gothic romance was always sort of at the heart, or at least at the beginning, of Dark Shadows. Now, a lot of these books were written. A whole lot of them. I got a bunch from an antique store years ago. And I try to read one a year. Now, this is the first of this paperback series. I did a review, I should say, on the second book last year called Victoria Winters, because I'd let my books get out of order. And I thought that was the first one that I had of the series. No, I was wrong. This is from 1966. And this one in particular is the 11th printing of this book, which tells you this was from February 1970. So from 66 to 70, they were still printing these books. Dark Shadows was an enormous success. It was a pop culture phenomenon. And it had a lot of good company in 1966 in that regard. If you take the period from like 65 to 67, in terms of TV, just TV alone, in 1966, you got Dark Shadows, you got Batman, you've got The Green Hornet, you've got Mission Impossible, The Monkees, a little show called Star Trek that's done pretty well in syndication since then, That Girl. They start showing the Avengers episodes with Miss Peel, I think the year before in the United States. So they kind of enter the American vernacular. The year before, also 65, we got Bewitched. You've got The Big Valley, F Troop, Get Smart, Gidget, Honey West, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. In 67, you get I Dream of Jeannie. And if we went back to 64, you get the Munsters, you get the Addams Family. Amazing how much longevity all these shows have had. But when you get down to it, Dark Shadows, as big as it was for about 4 years, kind of falls off in people's pop culture knowledge. Those who love it continue to love it. They know it well. But a lot of people don't. And that's after they've tried, I think, 1 or 2 revival series and the Tim Burton movie. Because you really just can't beat the original series. And it is a soap opera, 5 days a week. It's like well over 1,000 episodes. My wife and I have watched all the episodes from the Barnabas storyline on. We've now started from the beginning, and we're pretty far in. We've gotten through the first storyline, but we still have a lot of episodes to go before we finish watching the series. And the first time I read this book a few years ago, I had not seen the early episodes of Dark Shadows. So now I have a better knowledge of what was going on in those. And you'll notice on the cover, this is not the original cover. We have Barnabas on the cover. Barnabas is not in the book at this point, and he was not on the show at this point, but Barnabas sold covers. So what do we get in this book? Dark Shadows introduces a concept later in the series called parallel time, which we would probably call an alternate timeline, alternate dimension, where you could they could almost redo the show. Same actors, often same characters, but with maybe different life circumstances. That's kind of what you get from these novels. Now, this book, beyond the opening of the book, veers off from the TV show quite a bit. This kind of makes sense. Because it's a 5 shows a week kind of show, every day of the year, right? Every week of the year. unlike a show like, like Batman or whatever, there's no time in between episodes where you could fit in other storylines. So you kind of either had to do novelizations of the storylines, which limits you a little bit. And, well, they didn't always know where a storyline was going to go when they started it. Or you can create something entirely new, which they did here. Let's look at the first paragraph. You get a little idea of the style of writing from this. The ominous clouds of the October afternoon had warned of bad weather on the way, and now the threat was being fulfilled. Victoria Winters sat huddled in a corner of the shabby back seat of the taxi that she'd hired in the village to take her to Colin's house, aware of the driving rain and high wind that had come with the darkness of early evening. She sat quietly in the shadows, staring at the swaying headlight beams as they cut into the stormy blackness of the uneven road ahead, revealing little but its rutted stony surface and the hostile wet branches of the trees that crowded greedily on either side. Suddenly she was filled with forebodings and began to wonder whether she had made a mistake. So we've already parted from the first episode of Dark Shadows, because in that episode, Victoria Winters meets Burke Devlin. Now, he's a big part of the first storyline. He does get mentioned in this, but very little. And he only, I think, has one scene where he's actually present and talking to people. So we're going in an entirely different direction with this one. Okay, well, what is that direction? Well, Victoria makes it to Colin's house, and she meets the Collins family. And they're more or less what you see in the opening episodes of the series. Maybe a little bit different. Elizabeth Stoddard seems a little bit colder. Roger seems a little bit more, of a scoundrel. David's just about there. We get a little bit of Matthew, not a lot. We get a lawyer, though, who shows up, Will Grant. And there's a little bit of a love connection there between him and Victoria. We do get Carolyn, and she's pretty much what she is. I think she's younger in the book than she actually is in the show. She's a little bit more of, kind of a teenager than we get in the show. But then we also get Ernest Collins. Now, Ernest Collins, you will not see hide nor hair of him in the Dark Shadows TV show. In the book, he is a violinist, a cousin of Elizabeth and Rogers. And he has a sort of tortured soul. And Victoria soon learns about a woman who was killed on the estate a year earlier. And they suspect Ernest might have had something to do with it. And so what we get is a little bit of Gothic romance and a bit of a mystery story about who is responsible for that death, who has been making attempts on Victoria's life, why have they been doing it? And Ross does a really good job, to be honest with you, of just writing a fun read that keeps you engaged. It's not winning any awards. It's not high art, but it's pretty good. You get some clues along the way. He does a pretty good job of making it possible that anybody in the Collins family is responsible. And of course, if you're a fan of the show, you might go, well, of course, so-and-so wouldn't do it. Well, it wouldn't be. But everything's a little different here. Could be any of them, right? Carolyn wouldn't be responsible for a murder in the TV show. She would have been written off the show. But maybe in the book she is. Fun read. It's a quick read, 12 chapters, and you can see it's not super long. I usually read about a chapter a day at work as a way to just break away from the computer for a while. My wife could probably read this thing in like 2 hours and just go right through it. And there used to be a great market for relatively short, cheap paperbacks, romance, mysteries, crime stories, horror, fantasy, sci-fi, you name it. You'd pick these things up at grocery stores, convenience stores, Now you mostly see it like in airports, but there used to be a thriving market in this stuff, and Ross wrote a lot of them. And he's a good writer. He's a solid writer. Like I said, it isn't high art, but it kept me engaged, keeps you kind of guessing a little bit. I did figure it out, maybe midway, 2/3 of the way through, but I didn't figure it out in such a way as, oh, well, this is definitely what happened. I don't even need to read the rest. No, I needed to read to see if I was right. Okay, I'd read it a few years ago. I kind of forgot, but so I had a little help there. There is a kind of a clue, though, that I think will, oh, I get it. I know what's happening here, but it's not super obvious. Fun little books if you can find them. I've read about 4 of them so far. I had a good time with all of them. Good time with Dark Shadows. Love the show. It's on Tubi. There's Dark Shadows Beginnings, which goes from the very first episode up until the point where Barnabas shows up. Then there's the main Dark Shadows. I don't know what you'd call it. Not a channel. You get what I'm talking about. Dark Shadows show. That just goes from Barnabas to the end. There's a lot of them. Watch one a night. Binge them if you want to. You're still going to be taking a long time. Fun shows. They were done live on tape, so you get to see the actors flub lines, forget lines a little bit. Boom mics are sometimes coming down, in view. You sometimes get the camera going weird on you. People will be talking and a fly will buzz down on their forehead and they have to keep doing a speech without doing anything about it. Very charming. It's a really fun show. Crazy storylines. I highly suggest it. And I highly suggest The Dark Shadows novels by Marilyn Ross. If you can find them in a thrift store, find them in an antique store, old and used bookstore, and they're not too expensive, grab a few of them. I think you'll have a good time with them. That'll do it for my little review of Dark Shadows. Spoiler free. Read on to find out who's behind all the evil going on at Colin's house. I think you'll enjoy it. What say you in the audience? Any memories of Dark Shadows? Any memories of these books? I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Maybe think about subscribing to the channel. I do various reviews, books, comic books, games, TV shows, movies, etc. I try to cover a wide variety of pop culture, basically stuff that I like. So you're not going to see a lot of negative reviews on it. And I'm doing a lot of spooky type videos for October. Did it last October as well. So if you're in the mood, you can find those. Should pop up in the bottom corner over here. Click that. You'll see the playlist with all the spooky videos I've done. So until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun in this spooky autumn. And maybe read some Dark Shadows. And I'll see you hopefully again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.